folks who weren't able to make it. So what we're going to do, this is going to sound formal, but it's really not, to make sure that things are being recorded. If you have a question during the Q&A, we'll have some of these mics on down here so that the video can pick it up. If you're not comfortable coming to a mic, Kelsey over here in the yellow sweater is going to be able to give you an index card, and you can write down your question, and I will read that and point it to one of the appropriate Metro folks to answer that. And so I think that's everything that I have to cover, and I'm going to kick it over to Greg Claxton.
Thanks, Rochelle. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Greg Claxton with the Nashville Planning Department. I manage the Advanced Planning and Research team within the department, and I'm the principal planner for the study. Before I get underway, I want to hit 3 main points so that you kind of have a framework for everything else I'm about to say. The first is that this is sort of an introductory meeting. We're kind of letting folks know that the study is underway and how we're thinking about the study. We don't have recommendations yet. We'll have some findings that we present to council at the end of March, and then we'll have a few months of additional engagement and work with the community and internal after that. The second, one of the questions we've gotten at most of these meetings so far is this study about affordable housing? Because I'm going to talk a lot about housing affordability. And so I want to distinguish those two a little bit. By affordable housing, what I mean is housing that has some sort of subsidy for it, whether that's from the federal government, the state government, Metro, or even private entities. And that because it has a subsidy that's intended to help people who have low and moderate incomes, people have to qualify to sort of show that they qualify for the income that's being targeted by that housing. This study is not focused on affordable housing, with one minor caveat that I'm going to explain later on. Instead, this study is looking at the rules that govern how people can use their property, that shapes how and where and in what form housing gets built. So in that way, it's focused on the market rate housing, or just what the housing market in general produces, and not specifically affordable housing. The third piece that we've gotten at all of these meetings so far is about an effort about a year ago called NEST. NEST was, I think, controversial among the council and among the community. And so one of the questions we've gotten is this study NEST 2.0? It is not. And I'm going to kind of clarify in what ways it's not in 3 parts. So first, NEST had a lot of different components to it, several different bills, some of which were relatively uncontroversial and were passed by council last year, some of which were a little bit more technical related to the building code. Those were withdrawn, but we have been working with the fire department and the codes department and maybe bring recommendations on those forward in the next couple of months. And then third were some controversial proposals to change how units are allowed within R and RS zoning. That is 1 family and 1 and 2 family zoning districts. NEST was, in our view, a pretty broad brush approach to taking a look at this. Our approach within this study is to be targeted and strategic. And I know your first question is going to be, what does targeted and strategic mean? And I'm going to spend the entire rest of the presentation talking through that. So when the planning department thinks about the future of Nashville, our guiding document is what's called the general plan. This is Nashville Next. It was adopted by the Planning Commission in 2015 and updated in 2017. And it is a very, very extensive document. But broadly, at the very highest level, there's 2 things I want to highlight for y'all to be aware of. The first, up on the screen on the left, is a set of guiding principles. This is broadly what we heard from the public as we engage people throughout the process they wanted for the future of Nashville. Now, these are very kind of mom and apple pie stuff, but it's important to sort of get everyone on the same page. Like, what is it that we're trying to do over the next 10 or 15 or 20 years? And then on the right is what we call the growth and preservation concept map. And so this is where we took the guiding principles. We took the geography of Nashville. We looked at kind of where the market was and what our opportunities were, what the street network is like, and try to put that together into a vision for how we manage growth over the next 25 years. So I'm going to talk through what's on this map a little bit. I apologize, it's a little washed out, but it is on the side of the wall as well. And so first, the preservation features. This is what we call the green network. And it's a lot of area to the north and west with pockets throughout the rest of the county that represent our floodplains, steep slopes, rural areas, and our park system. So the idea here is that for a variety of reasons, these are features that we want to protect and that we want to preserve over the coming decades. Then around, kind of scattered throughout the middle, is some yellow areas. These are neighborhoods. This isn't exclusively residential areas, but they're kind of mostly residential with pockets of other things, whether it's kind of small commercial nodes, schools, fire stations, that sort of thing. And our expectation is not that these won't ever change, but that they're not part of our growth management strategy. And then third are what we call our centers and corridors. These are the bright orange places on the map that we envision to become kind of vibrant mixed-use, mixed-income activity centers, where if you're living in one of them, you might walk out, catch the transit, take transit to your work, come home, stop at the library, stop at the grocery store, and then head to your home. Or if you don't live within one of them, you might drive, park, get out of your car, walk around, go to the grocery store, go to the park, that kind of thing. And while you're out walking around in these, you have the opportunity to run into neighbors. That is ultimately a lot of how we're seeing kind of our growth framework, is the opportunities to put things close together for people who want that kind of close-knit, community-oriented space. These activity centers are connected by a frequent transit system. And so the Choose How You Move referendum we see as implementing kind of this part of Nashville Next. And so that's a lot of how we're thinking about linking growth, development, and mobility is through the improvements, through transit improvements, and through kind of the street network improvements in Choose How You Move. There's one other feature on here that is so tiny, you almost certainly can't see it. And that is what we call transition and infill. And so this is a little bit of space, about 600 feet, off of every corridor and off of every center, where we suggested this is an appropriate place to transition from these corridors, from these centers, into the surrounding neighborhoods, and that is a viable way to add in a diversity of housing types. So one question we get naturally is, where did Nashville Next come from? We spent about 3 years working on the process. Up here are all of the phases where we went out to the public to get guidance, where we kind of said, hey, here's what we heard previously, here's what questions we have for you tonight, and then here's what we're going to do next. All told, throughout the 3-year process, throughout these many different phases, we had touch points with about 18,000 people in the community. And so as an example of what that looks like, on the bottom was an overflow crowd that we had at one of our meetings focused specifically on housing and gentrification. So we literally, you can see people kind of waiting, standing on the wall in this very large room. We had people overflowing into the foyer outside. And then on top, we have what we called a growth mapping exercise, where we gathered people around these very large maps of Davidson County and had them work together to sort of place stickers on the map to show, well, where do you see us adding homes over the next 25 years? Where do you see us adding jobs? And so we took all of those maps, stacked them on top of one another, and produced this just to get a broad sense of how are people thinking about growth in the future. And so it was out of this, it was out of our technical analysis, it was out of the guiding principles that we prepared this, what we called at the time a preferred future. It became the growth and preservation concept map. And so we said, well, how did we do? Did we get this right? Did we capture what you've been telling us for the past 2 years or so? And by and large, we took these ratings as very positive. Most folks agreed. Now, we didn't just say, hey, isn't this a pretty map? Didn't we get the colors right? We said for each one of those features, here are things that we would do to implement it. So for the green network, we would recommend not extending sewers into areas that don't have them right now. Or in the case of that transition and infill, we said, use different types of housing, such as cottage courts, fourplexes, townhomes, or stacked flats, to create a transition from centers and corridors to neighborhood centers. So about 2,000 people took the survey. 70% of them said this was important to do. 18% said not important, and 12% were very emphatic. They said, please don't do it. But it was out of that kind of feedback, out of that kind of discussion, and out of that kind of testing of the ideas within Nashville Next that led to the framework that we had, that led to its adoption in 2015. Now, the concept map is a policy document. It is a vision for an area, for the county as a whole, and it guides other decisions. Also within Nashville Next are a set of community plans that provide a more detailed view, what's called a community character policy map, that says a little bit more specifically, this parcel should have this character in the future. Urban neighborhood maintenance. This parcel should have this character, a suburban community center. Again, both of these are still policy documents that guide other decisions. And one of the big decisions that they guide is zone changes. And so zoning is not policy, it's not guidance, zoning is the law. Zoning controls the physical development of land, be it use, density, height, setbacks, parking, landscaping, and so on. And so the way that we think of these together is providing the broad vision from Nashville Next and the community plans that is then implemented over time through zoning. Now I want to bring us up to the present day. Since Nashville Next was adopted, how have we grown? And how is that compared to our expectations for growth over that time? And so what I'm going to show is our forecast that we had for Nashville Next and how that compares to our growth in jobs, population, and households. And so on jobs, our actual growth in Davidson County is shown on the red line, and then our forecast is shown on the gray line. And so you can see we added jobs much more rapidly in Davidson County since 2010 than we were expecting. We had a dip down because of the recession as part of the pandemic, and then we have rebounded very, very strongly and very, very rapidly. Population is similar. We grew a little bit faster than we were expecting throughout the 2010s. We had a dip with the pandemic, and then we have rebounded, though not quite as strongly as on jobs. Now, I know folks look around, they see a lot of towers downtown, they see a lot of townhomes and new housing development in different parts of the county, and they say, well, if we've added so much housing over the past few years, but our population has not yet come back to where it was in 2020, why is it that we need to do the study? Why is it that we need more housing? And so the thing that kind of brings these two together is our growth in the number of households. So this is called household formation. And to give you a really simple example, imagine a married couple with an adult child living at home. They're in one home. If the adult child moves out, those three people are now need two homes. So that's household formation. That is what drives demand for housing. And you can see we've had a really, really sharp spike in that since 2020. Now, I'm going to shift from looking back and what has happened historically to looking forward over the next 10 years. And so this is that forecast that we had from Nashville Next, looking ahead over the next 10 years. And so using our forecast from 10 years ago, this would suggest that we need to plan for about 30,000 additional housing units. Next, I'm going to show, based on the rate at which we added homes from 2010 to 2023, if you do that on an annual basis and you look ahead the next 10 years, that would suggest we probably should plan for about 70,000 additional units. Now, one of the studies that our housing division has going on is called the Unified Housing Strategy. This is a broad look at our housing market overall that they started on a year ago, and then winnowing into focus in a lot of detail on affordable housing needs and programs and kind of operations. Like I said earlier, this study is not an affordable housing study, but we do have that common base of that housing market look that the Unified Housing Strategy did. And so we have brought an estimate from that of what might be a more realistic number for us to plan for over the next 10 years. And here the expectation is that we should probably anticipate needing 90,000 additional homes. Now, as the manager of the Advanced Planning and Research Program within the Planning Department, the miss between Nashville Next and our actual production worries me a lot, because other departments, as you will hear, incorporate that into their long-range planning. And so I'm very concerned that we get this as accurate as possible and that we not sort of plan to fall short, that we plan for sort of what a really reasonable amount of growth is given our economic sectors. And so because of that, we're looking right now to see if we need to provide a little bit of additional buffer beyond that 90,000 units. We don't have a final number yet, but we are thinking something like another 20 to 30,000 units over the next 10 years. Now, the last thing I'm going to show is a preliminary estimate of how much supply we think we can add under our current zoning code and our current zoning map, again, over the next 10 years. So this is under the current rules. guide how and where development happens. And we think under the current zoning code and the current zoning map, we expect that we could build out probably 70,000 units. And so it's this gap between what we think we're likely to be able to build and what we think we're likely to need, or what we think we need to be at least ready for, that this study is trying to figure out how do we address that in a way that is in line with our general plan, Nashville Next. And as we think about that, we're guided by three broad ideas. One is the need for abundant housing. And the idea here is simply that when housing is scarce, housing is expensive. The second is being very mindful of what infrastructure is necessary to support that housing growth. That's an area that Nashville has traditionally struggled with, and that is something we are trying to figure out, how do we make all of that fit together a little bit better? And then last, we recognize that we are a very large county. We have a lot of different kinds of places within the county, and so we want to be mindful of our distinctive communities, their distinctive character, and their distinctive needs. We have a longer video on these three topics on the website as part of a broader introduction, but that's where I'm going to leave this for right now. And so where I want to end on is what are the main questions that we're trying to address, and how are we thinking about that? Again, I'm going to touch this pretty lightly. If people have questions about it, I'm happy to go into that in more detail, but there is a longer explanation on our website. And so first, we want to understand what is it that stands in the way of building housing that works for all Nashvillians. And so part of this is thinking about that future housing demand and what counts as enough. We're looking at our current zoning and building codes. We're thinking about middle housing types that are more cost effective to build, but that may be difficult under our current code and map. And then we're thinking about the financial feasibility of those building types. That leads into thinking about where should we add housing that works to meet Nashvillians' vision for the future. And here we're going to test out different approaches to this, all consistent with Nashville Next. We're thinking primarily right now about where infrastructure is currently available and where different building types are economically feasible. We'll be thinking about the affordability of those building types, but we'll also be looking at a new tool that the state has given us. And I said earlier, this study is not focused on affordable housing, that is subsidized housing, with one small exception. This is the small exception. The state gave us a new tool to allow a bonus program. That is where, in exchange for providing a small number of affordable units, a property owner may get a bonus in the entitlements that they can use, or a reduction in some other standard. We are investigating to see kind of how we would calibrate that and whether that would be effective in Nashville. Last, we're looking at what infrastructure and what amenities are necessary to support that level of growth. Both the critical infrastructure, what is it that we've got to have in place for the housing to work? What are the things that need to keep up with the growth overall? And then what are things like, how we grow, change access to things like parks, libraries, and grocery stores? And that broadly is how we're looking at this housing and infrastructure study. That concludes my part. I'll be back for questions later on. But now I'm going to turn it over to Felix Castrodad from WeGo to talk through kind of the transit implications of how we think about growth.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon. I work with WeGo, and just a quick information about us. We are the public transit operators in Davidson County. We provide about 8 million, a little over 8 million rides a year. That's about 32,000 on average rides a day. And if you look at this map, we have a fairly good coverage in the county when it comes to considering how big Davidson County is. And if you saw the map that Greg presented earlier with the activity centers and the areas of growth, our routes provide fairly good service on many of those areas with frequent routes. And although we provide good coverage, the bread and butter of what we, the ridership that we carry is along the major pikes, the major corridors. That's about 75% of our total ridership. And I put an image here from Nashville Next about how this helps transit. And what the reality is that when you have, some densities more close to each other in terms of the locations, in terms of the destinations. It helps transit to be more effective. And that's what we notice when we operate along the major routes in Nashville, the major corridors. Now, as I mentioned, although we have fairly good coverage, the landscape is changing. And what we are noticing, this is data from the census, and I'll explain in a minute what you're looking at. What we're seeing is that even though we have good coverage, there's a lot of areas that we do not cover very well, especially many of these areas have been changing in recent years. What you're looking on this map is our route network, and we put a buffer of about half mile from each of the routes. And then we try to show you what we call transit propensity areas. What that means is, based on census information, those are areas that you have populations that may be more propense to use transit, lower income, minorities, zero-car households, and so on. So what we're noticing is that there are several of those areas that are outside of our main network that we do not cover very well right now. And one of the trends that we have been observing in recent years is that those areas have been growing, and some of the ridership in areas where we used to have fairly good ridership have gone down. And one of the reasons why this is happening is that the pressures of the cost of housing has pushed people to other areas of the county where housing may be easier for them to pay for, to afford. But at the same time, there's a trade-off when it comes to that. Maybe you can afford the house in there, but your transportation become more of an issue and another problem that you have to address. This is an example of some of the work that we do with some of these locations outside of our main corridors where we still have ridership and people that need to access transit, but we don't have the infrastructure necessarily that's going to make it more accessible or safer. So the images that you see at the top are the before. The images that you see at the bottom are the after. This is in different parts of Nashville, but you can see this situation. You can put this image anywhere in Nashville. You're going to see a lot of situations like these. So in our partnership with NDOT, we have been able to work on some of these areas, definitely provide an enhancement to accessibility, making it a lot safer where people can access. But these are spot improvements. Still, we may improve this area, but there's, a lot of gaps sometimes in these areas. And they're difficult to serve. And some of these projects can be very expensive when you factor in things like topography, utilities, right-of-way, or so on. But nonetheless, we know there's a lot of needs, so we've been trying to make some improvements in that regard. Now, one of the ways that we have been trying to address how we better serve the neighborhoods is by trying to decentralize our network. We have a network that is very reliant on people going to or from downtown. And that's, of course, is an equity concern when you have something that is so fixed on that. So we're trying to address this by creating what we call crosstown routes. Those are routes that do not go to downtown and provide east-west, north-south service. And many of those intersect some of the major routes. So that gives you an option, depending where you are, you can transfer to a more frequent route and be able to connect. Think about it, if you live in Antioch and you're trying to go somewhere on the west side, you have to go all the way to downtown and then take a bus back out so you can go to where you want to go. And I can tell you, I wouldn't do it. It takes a lot of time of your day, but some people unfortunately have to do it. They don't have other option. Along with designing these crosstown routes, we are working in providing areas that are a lot easier, a lot better, a lot safer to make these transfers. The examples that you see here are from a recent project that we actually opened last year. It's the Dr. Ernest Rip Patton North Nashville Transit Center. This is at the intersection of Clarksville Pike and 26th Avenue North. And this was a project that we knew we have several routes that went through here. We knew that there was a big need for a better, point of transfer for the community, and we work very closly with the community, and we took their feedback, not only in designing these, but all the history that, is happening or that shapes North Nashville it's been reflected in a lot of the things of how we designed this building. But I would say that more important than the building, we also did a service redesign. And to be able to serve this center better, we extended routes, we created new routes, and we increased frequencies and the hours of operation, just to give a lot more access to people. And not only that, but also to help this become an asset of the community. We have free Wi-Fi. You have kids coming here to do their homework because they can access Wi-Fi and be able to, utilize this facility in the neighborhood. But as I mentioned, with the service redesign comes a big benefit of this, and it's the access to different opportunities. What you're seeing here is before we did this change, people had about, we measured about 13,000 or so, 500 access to new jobs, I should say, within a 30-minute ride. After we did the improvements, that jumped to over 600,000 jobs. 64,000 jobs. And that's a big improvement, but not also when you think about jobs, think also about access to things like food, healthcare, other services that were not there before, plus the ability of do that a lot faster, not having to go to downtown. Many of these trips, if you're going to Midtown, if you're going to Madison, for example, or Dickerson Pike, somewhere north, you don't have to go downtown. You can take a bus and you save a lot of time by not having to do that trip. Lastly, Choose How You Move, that was passed this last November, addresses a lot of needs for transit and provides a lot of not only service but also infrastructure with more transit center, a lot improvement to stops, a lot of improvements combined with what NDOT will be doing with fixing and providing new sidewalks, park and rides that can allow for people that do not live necessarily, as Greg mentioned, close to a bus route that can park and safely and more conveniently ride the bus to places. But a lot of these, depends on the type of infrastructure that is going to make it easier for people to access. And you'll see that when Marty presents in a minute from NDOT, that collaboration is going to be very key in terms of making sure that accessibility, that safe factor, that convenience factor is there for the public too. It's not that everybody needs to ride transit, but if you ever have a need for transit, it's another option in the toolbox that can provide an option when you don't have it. So I'm going to turn it over now to Marty, who's going to talk to you about NDOT. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Felix, and thank you all for being here today. We'll spend a few minutes talking about NDOT, but my name is Marty Sewell. I'm the Transportation and Planning Director for the Nashville Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure. And we're charged with building and maintaining a safe, reliable, and balanced transportation system that provides options for how people get around the city and supports vibrant neighborhoods. When we talk about safe, reliable, and balanced, we face significant challenges in all of those areas, as you all know. And much of that stems from the way we historically grew. For many years, as you know, the development moved from the center of the city outward, and as that happened, we didn't necessarily build sidewalks and bikeways and other infrastructure or support public transit out to those areas. And so it became pretty easy for people to get around if they had a car. But if they didn't have a car, things became more and more difficult over the years, again, as we move further and further out. Especially for those who aren't able to drive or those who are too young or too old to drive, we've definitely created some challenges for them in order to access jobs and other services. And as the city continues to grow, we have to come up, and we have been coming up with ways to address these different challenges as we've seen more traffic congestion, as we've also seen our roads have more and more crashes and injuries as a result of that. But over the last several decades, or past decade in particular, we've gone through a lot of planning exercises and processes that have helped us identify needs and set a vision for the transformation of our system so that it's safer, more reliable, and a more modern transportation system. And that started with Nashville Next, as we've talked about already with the goal of expanding our access for residents, however they choose to move around our region, so that they have options and choices to, and also to be able to take advantage of, going back to the National Next, building off of the centers and corridors, making sure that our network adequately connects those spaces and does so in a safe way. Other more specific planning efforts have looked at our sidewalk system, our bikeways, and also the transit system, as Felix was mentioning earlier. But more recently, our Vision Zero action plan at NDOT has helped us focus our lens on safety and better understand some of the conditions that are out on our roadways and understanding why they are the way they are and why we're seeing some of the results that we have seen. We're unfortunately, when it comes to injuries and deaths on our roadways, we are leading on that statistic among our peers. And that is something that we work every day, and we recognize at NDOT, along with our other partners in the transportation world in this area, that we have to be all hands on deck and responding to that and making things better. But I'll shift gears right now to talk about a couple of the things that we're doing in the context of growth and development to address that. But first was our the multimodal transportation analysis for site development guidelines. This was a new guideline. We've had traffic impact studies that we use to assess the impact of new growth on our transportation network for a long time, but this new approach that has been in place for a little over a year now has changed the scope of that, widened the scope somewhat, and it has also made it clear with the clarification of the goal that safety is definitely part of that mix, as well as the multimodal component, that we're not just looking at the traffic signals and how the cars get around, but we are taking a holistic view of all the different ways people move around the city. It includes an analysis of the surrounding area around the proposed development, the needs that are there today before that development even it comes online, and identifying what those impacts would be to the system, and then also identifying mitigation, whether it's new sidewalks, new signalization, crosswalks, bus stops, that sort of thing that can be delivered with that development on behalf of the rest of the city. There are limits to what we can require, whether it comes to sidewalks or other improvements. There are court decisions that have come down in the last few years, as well as state law related to impact fees and being able to assess fees on new developers where that money could then be used to support the development of new infrastructure that we're talking about. But all those things are limitations, but we live in that world, and we do have the MMTA or these guidelines that help us when we look at new development that are allowing us to generate and to get the development community to support in building new infrastructure that is helpful. One other aspect to talk about is, of course, what Felix was hitting on earlier, the Choose How You Move initiative, the Transportation Improvement Program that voters approved last November. That's going to allow us to achieve a lot of, not in addition to transit, a lot of the other goals that have been set and other priorities by the previous planning exercises that we've been through, including Nashville Next and everything that followed it. But as we jump into what that does in addition to transit, signalization, for example, as you look at this map, you see a lot of the pink, those are actually dots, lots of pink dots. Those represent our traffic signals throughout the city. We're going to have the opportunity to replace 2/3 of our existing network of traffic signals, modernizing them, making them connected to our downtown traffic center that will make us more responsive to changing traffic conditions, and also just be able to better manage demand at any given time of the day. A lot of that's in progress right now. We're also going to be able to build about 86 miles of sidewalks. That would help deliver on the priority sidewalk network that's been identified by Walk and Bike and other planning exercises over the last several years. There are also, the purple dots, the 54 miles, under those purple dots are the 54 miles of the all-access corridors that Felix was describing earlier for the transit priority. And then there's also 39 miles of complete street projects, which would incorporate a wide variety of improvements that would make it safer and easier for people to travel however they would want to travel on our roadways. The all-access corridors, of course, prioritizing transit on those busiest routes. Along with that would come sidewalk improvements and other safety features that would make those corridors safer for people to operate on. The complete streets projects that would happen all over the county would overhaul other important corridors and make those safer for all of our users. The Vision Zero action plan that I mentioned earlier had identified a high injury network where the majority or the vast majority of the injuries and deaths occur on our roadways. And as we look at that network compared to what's accommodated for on the complete street projects and the all access corridors, almost 80 miles of that high entry network would be transformed as a result of the investments that we'll be able to make thanks to the voters last November. With all these improvements funded, we're now taking also a look at how we can update our priority list to advance other projects across the city through regular capital spending program that is typical on an annual basis here in Metro. So I may have gone through those a little faster than I intended to, but I don't know that anyone's going to complain about that. I'll take this opportunity to pass it over to Steve Mishu from Metro Water Services, and he'll talk about their program.
Thank you, sir. Housekeeping note, where's the slide shifter? Enter? Okay. Thank you, everybody. I'm Steve Mishu. I'm one of the engineers at Metro Water Services. I'd like to say I've been there for a long time. I've been there about 21 years. But in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot of people that's been there a lot longer than I have. There's other guys that are presenting that's been here 35 and 40 years. All right, let's see. You said hit the enter button. Let's see. There we go. Ha, success. All right, so part of what Metro Water does is we provide domestic water to a lot of our customers. If you look to the screen left, you'll see a little white area that's west of Nashville. We don't provide water to that area. That's Harpeth Valley Utility District. And then to the top north, there's a Madison Suburban Utility District. They provide their own water as well. But for the rest of the county, we provide water for the rest of the county. A few things to note, we pump out about 110 million gallons per day of water to our customers. We have over 3,000 feet of pipes, and we have over 2,100 fire hydrants. Okay, great. All right, we also provide sewer. We have the same kind of boundary. If you look to the west, we do not provide sewer for Harpeth Valley Utility District. And if you look to the north, I know it's shaded white. That's actually our jurisdiction. We just don't really have many sewer lines over there because it's quite mountainous and quite, it's not well populated. So, but that's our area, but a lot of those people are usually on like grinder pumps, septic systems or that nature. Once again, we're treating about 150 million gallons of sewage a day before it gets back into the rivers. We have, once again, another over 3,000 linear feet of sewer pipes. And then I'll talk about our customers next. So this is a little slide about how many customers we have. It's been gradually increasing. I don't think it's going to come to any surprise to any of you guys because you guys are going to look to your left and to your right, and you're going to find new homes where it used to not be there. So I'm pretty sure this is not surprising to anybody, but our customers have dramatically increased in the last few years. To help with that, we have a capital improvement plan that we normally look at. We're due to upgrade that, I think, in 2026. And it usually happens 5 to 10 years. And we kind of look at the overall system for our water and sewer, and we look and we try to analyze where our future growth is going to be, and we try to accommodate based on that. Okay, let's go. All right, so this slide says that we're partnering with development and choose how you move corridors. I'd like to say that that's really a partnership, but for our developers, they know it's not really much of a partnership because they are obligated to take care of their own increases. So before any plan comes in, we will require capacity letters for water and sewer. And based on their increased usage, if they go from a property that has one house to a property that has 20 houses, they'll have to pay for the increased flows. And that's for water and sewer. And those capacity payments will go to plant upgrades. So 5 years ago, if we did the same slides, we'd probably be talking about a little bit less water treatment and a little bit less sewage treatment. So I know it says partnering with developers, but it's really not. So in addition to the capacity letters, if there's pipes in front of their property that are not sufficiently sized, or it's not sufficient to handle the increased flows, we make the developers upgrade that. So if there's an 8-inch sewer in front of the property and their increased flows require a 10-inch, we make them pay for the 10-inch. The previous slide, we were talking about the capital improvement program. If we have an area that we know it's set to grow and the future growth is supposed to be a 15-inch, that is, I guess, where you see the participation. We will talk to the developers and say, feel free to upgrade from an 8 to 10 at your penny, or if you wish to go forward a little bit more and do the regional basin and upsize, then we will try for participation. When we do a participation, we have to present that to council for approval, and part of that process is to explain how many additional customers that we will get and about the time frame it will cost us to recover that funds. All right, stormwater. We don't really have as much highlighted over here because we kind of handle the entire city. The only areas we don't handle at the stormwater group is the satellite cities. So if you looked to the screen left and you saw that we weren't serving Harpeth Valley customers for water and sewer, that is absolutely not the case for stormwater. If a plan comes in Bellevue Mall, we review it for stormwater. We don't for water sewer, we do for Bellevue. If you live in Bellevue and you have a roadside ditch that's slowly silted in, we will absolutely go out there and upgrade those ditch and clean out the pipes. One thing to really note is that as far as MS4s go, which is a separate storm system, we're one of the largest in the nation. It says we're the 4th largest. Essentially what that means is anytime you discharge stormwater into the streams, you got to get permitting through the state of Tennessee. So that's what we're doing here. We're getting the state permits to allow us to do the things that we do over here. A lot of inlets, a lot of linear feet of pipes. All right, next slide. Let's get to something a little bit more fun. All right, when we review stormwater plans, we review those for grading, drainage, erosion control, and water quality. So our requirements for detention is to ensure that any development that comes through will reduce flows between the 2-year, the 5-year, the 10-year, the 25, the 50, and the 100. So we have pre and post requirements, and a lot of times a development who has a grass site today that ends up getting a lot of imperviousness will end up with larger detention ponds. Something new in the regulations as of the last 10 years or so is what we implemented our low impact development regulations. So that's really a water quality initiative, but it does have some flood control because it reduces volume runoff. The image to the left is a pervious pavement parking lot, much like the one we have outside and out of this building. So those stones are actually impervious. They do not allow water to go through the stone, but there's voids in between the stone as they lay it. And below there's probably 2 to 3 feet of washed stone that helps infiltrate and recharge the groundwater. The next two images on the right are bioretention areas. You can see a slight little ponding area is designed to take all the water from the site. It will go to these areas. You see plantings that help absorb the water. Then you see a mulch layer. Below the mulch layer is usually a 3 to 4 foot layer of a media that's usually a mix of soil and sand, mostly sand. And then below that, you'll have another layer of stone that helps infiltrate water into the ground. All right, so in the world of stormwater, it's very, very young compared to water and sewer. Water sewer regulations started many, many years ago, and the stormwater regulations, not for Nashville, just in general, didn't start until about 1979 through the Clean Water Act. So we initially started at Public Works and eventually moved over in early 2000 to Metro Water, And that's when we started coming in with some more robust stormwater requirements. Detention was always there since the 80s, and water quality didn't start until 1999, and that water quality was mostly what I'll call TSS reduction, is total suspended solids, which just means soil that's kind of like raised up. So as it floats in the water, we used to just send it through like treatment devices that helps settle it down and have the cleaner water go. And then our LID manual, like the images I showed before, and it started in 2017. So once again, very baby as far as the world of water and sewer. We just started actually having a stormwater master plan. The main ingredient on the stormwater master plan, if you look in the center, is the flood reduction. But we're not only looking at just a single source of flood reduction. I don't know if you could read it, but there's actually social considerations that goes into the plan. There's environmental features that we look at. And then to the top right, we also have schedule as well. So it's not a basic idea. It's one of those things that we look at. Where do we do improvements? Want to make sure that we're spreading the improvements around with the entire county appropriately. And wherever possible, we like to add some nice little benches, or, I mean, if you ever go to the Metro Water complex up in 3rd Avenue, I think we even created a dog park. Very nice. You should go check it out. But this one is set to be completed in 2028, and we're all pretty excited to look into it. All right, that's the last of my slides. So I'm going to turn it over now myself.
All right, and so I just wanted to thank you all for, I know that was a lot of information you sat through. We have a couple more of these community conversations next week. Monday, we'll be at the Madison Library. And then Tuesday, we will be at the Bordeaux Library. I also wanted to thank Councilmember Horton and Councilmember Cash for being here today. And I want to say, Councilmember Cash, you must have had so much fun last night. You wanted to come back. So anyways, like I said earlier, we're going to open it up to questions. And for those of you who did not see or weren't here when I first started earlier today, we are going to do up at the table, because this is being recorded. Lisa, if you can go ahead and turn that mic on. However, if you're not comfortable doing the mic, we will have Kelsey. Where are you? Can you raise your hand? Is she in the room? We have staff who, if you would rather write down your question, we will take those and we will read them and have somebody answer them. So with that, we are opening it up to questions for anyone who has questions about what they heard, about the study, anything that we can help address today. And then as well, afterwards, we've also got these boards where we're hoping to get your feedback. It's over against the wall to your left. So yeah, opening it up for questions. Don't be shy. It's not formal. You don't have to give your name and address. There is Kelsey with the note cards if you would like to write anything down. So. All right, yeah, come on. Oh, do you want to write down your question? Okay, great. Yep. No, because it's being recorded, we would like to have it. Okay, yeah, come on up. Thank you.
To the microphone.
Yes.
Thank you all. And my name is George Ewing. I live in Whites Creek. I'm really excited to see so much of this be transit oriented. I'll have to.
You may want to take a seat. So.
My name is George Ewing. My question that I had, being from Whites Creek and seeing some of this be transit oriented, is the balance of what we see for inter-county migration, bringing pressure onto the transit. Are we seeing that some of these areas at the periphery of the county that are seeing more transit pressure, are those folks commuting in from outside the county versus creating demand for transit at the edges of our county? And then the other question I had was, I guess my understanding is that there is also a countywide conservation master plan. And I guess my concern is seeing the housing and infrastructure study move forward without kind of that third piece of the triangle, in the sense that if you're looking at where you're sending density and you're looking at housing and infrastructure, kind of the missing piece of that is where you're not. And so in a conservation-minded sense, I'm also involved with Nashville's Highlander and Forest Group. That's a concern that this moves forward without the conservation master plan, and how that be incorporated post facto and without that information moving forward, this with recommendations. So I thank you all for your time and for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm sure I have about 30 more, but I'm going to relinquish. Thanks.
Thank you for your question. I'll address the transit question. We haven't seen that at the peripheries of the county. We do run regional service, bus service between Nashville and most of the counties surrounding Nashville, including the Wego Star that connects to Wilson County. However, that service is commuter oriented, so service is very limited. And since the pandemic, a lot of people are working remotely or from home, or mix or hybrid. So that ridership is not quite there. However, I think as Choose How You Move moves forward and a lot of that service increases, and the quality of the service improves. That's why we're also planning 17 park and rides, that most of them will be actually on the periphery of the county, very close to county lines, to provide another option for people coming out of other counties to maybe park and ride, or our own residents that live close to the county lines to be able to do that as well. And not only for work, but for anything, including events, which, anybody that has attended anything in downtown, whatever, there's, something at Bridgeton Arena or, at the Ryman or somewhere else, it's very difficult to navigate the traffic. So from that standpoint, we are anticipating that ridership to be able to utilize those services as we continue to improve the service.
Thank you. I guess you can infer the question was.
Do you mind speaking to the mic? Sorry.
I don't mean to go on. I guess you can infer that the question was about that type of pressure inducing development changes that would then create kind of more exurban development on, apartments on Pikes type of hub and spoke, as opposed to providing the transit for them into areas. So you've answered it, so thank you. And then the second part of that was the possible integration with, say, the Greater Nashville Regional Council of Governments transit plans or understanding of what's happening at the edges of the counties and beyond to connect into that. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure thing. So I think there's a couple things that are implicit and a little bit explicit in what you asked about coordination across a bunch of different studies. We're at a point where a lot of different planning efforts are going on across multiple departments. You heard about some of them today. There's also GNRC, kind of the regional transportation body, is updating their regional transportation plan right now. We're coordinating with that around sort of the future build out and modeling and understanding kind of how we sync together with their regional kind of approach to growth and transportation investments. One where the timing is not quite as closely connected as we might like is that countywide conservation study. And so one of the things we're mindful of is, as we expect kind of recommendations from that over the next year or two, I think we're looking to have kind of a phased approach within housing and infrastructure, where we've got some initial recommendations. We think we will have some initial recommendations, we're not there yet, that kind of get us started and provide opportunities for these kind of more moderate scale housing types that provide kind of a sense of how it all fits together, even while we recognize there's going to be some additional guidance from, for example, corridor planning for Choose How You Move, or the countywide conservation study on how to balance some of these pieces. I think broadly, we're hoping to sort of set things up to relieve pressure on some of our natural resources, both kind of the green network, kind of the broad rural areas, the hilly areas that Steve mentioned are difficult to serve, but also floodplains woven throughout the county.
Okay, so we have a question, and Greg, I think this is going to be for you. What about the 4 apartment buildings having only 1 staircase instead of 2? It's a great question.
So that was something I kind of obliquely referenced earlier. This is something that's often called single stair access, which is available in some cities throughout the country, but not in Nashville right now. This is essentially how apartment buildings are built and how many access points you need within them. That is what we've been working through with our codes department and our fire department to see if that's something that fits within Nashville while maintaining high standards of safety. And so we expect to have recommendations on that at the end of the month.
Any other questions, or you want to run it? Yeah, come on up. Thank you.
You mentioned the bonus program that the state has put in. I was one, and the gentleman from Metro Water mentioned that we make developers pay for increased water pipes and sewer pipes. Could that be a bonus for developers that were willing to put in affordable housing, sharing some of those costs?
Well, let me give you the spill on the water and sewer side first. Unlike a lot of the other departments of Metro government, Metro Water is like an enterprise where all our funds come from our ratepayers. So the developers who turn in plans to us that review, the fine people who turn on their faucets to drink, and the same fine people who flush their toilets to make things go away, is what generates the revenues that we use. So we got to be very cautious and mindful of how we use ratepayers' money. And a lot of times we can't take ratepayers' money and even shift it from the water sewer world to the stormwater world. So even within Metro Water, the baskets carry different things, and we really can't even shift from side to side. So it's very tricky for us to say, hey, we're going to use ratepayers' money and subsidize a developer affordable housing. We just got to be very, very careful on what we do with the money that's generated through our funds.
Could it be done? Could there be any kind of arrangement?
As some of this moves forward, I think there'll be maybe some communications with maybe through the mayor's office, through Metro Legal and things of that nature. It's not really happening right now. Yeah. Affordable housing is a great thing. Next could be the churches. Churches provide good services. Maybe they get a break. And then I don't think it stops. I think once you find a thing that really deserves a break, then the next thing will deserve a break, and then almost everything deserves a break. So at the end of the day, we just got to be very mindful of the revenues that's generated. We're not the federal government. We can't print more money. So we just have to use the revenue that's in our system.
I had one more question for you.
Okay.
Thank you for answering that one. The Northwest was mostly septic and not sewer lines, and it's an area which really we could have increased growths and planned neighborhoods there. And I'm wondering how difficult it would be to put in some more sewer in the northwest part of the county.
Well, so with money, you could do anything. However, I don't want to speak for another department, but there's certain zonings, certain community characteristic plans that don't, at this time, award for that kind of development in that areas. So the answer I'm giving you is I think with money, you could almost do anything. Does it become feasible or not? I don't know. But we could do. Yeah,
it could be done.
We could make sewer go uphill. Absolutely.
Well,
we've done that before. So
it would come downhill back to town.
Once again, I think we got to just be mindful of the zoning and the characteristic of the land.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
One thing I'll just add on the support for affordable housing on the infrastructure side, I think Steve spoke well to the limitations that the enterprise funds have in terms of use of ratepayers' dollars. We have set up within planning through our housing division a program called Connecting Housing and Infrastructure Program, CHIP, which is sort of a small pot of money that's set aside to provide support for affordable housing developers when there's kind of a specific infrastructure need that they're having trouble with. So it's not out of the rate base, it's out of our capital spending plan, I think. But that is something that we've instituted in the past. I think we've had a couple recent awards for.
Got another written question. Sorry, I keep moving the mic, I'm short. Do you have thoughts you can share on the framework for your recommendations, i.e. updating comp plans? Do you anticipate any planning-led rezones?
Yes, thank you for that question. We are thinking about kind of the framework for how this moves forward. We are thinking in terms of updates to the zoning code, tweaks or possibly new districts to make modestly scaled housing more feasible and a little bit easier to build. And then also thinking about kind of identifying recommendations for changes to the zoning map to allow them. The timeline for that, like that is probably not something we're bringing to council in March, but we're looking beyond to June. But we are thinking not just of sort of making a report and a set of recommendations, but how do we kind of create the framework to allow this to happen, again, in strategic, smart locations that are in line with what we heard from the community over the past several years and through Nashville Next.
And Greg, can you speak to what is the remaining process for giving input as it relates to the plan? And I guess, do you want to talk through what's left to do between now and March 24th and then a little bit beyond to June? Okay.
Like I said at the outset, we don't have recommendations yet. This is sort of a get to know you meeting. But our expectation is we will bring a report to council at the end of March that compiles all of our findings and provides a set of recommendations. Mostly, I think, around kind of those zoning districts and how we're thinking about sort of our opportunities to manage growth through this study. We would then go into an extended period of further community engagement to talk about kind of the recommendations. We'd look at the standards for these kind of modestly scaled homes and give the community a chance to sort of vet that, give, honestly, builders a chance to vet that, because, again, we want a set of districts that are feasible, that are economically viable, and that are constructible, so we don't create a lot of opportunities on paper that don't actually produce housing for anyone. Again, that's sort of through April, May, and June as we head towards a final report to council at the end of June.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we can do activities on the board, and staff is happy to do individual one-on-one. Yeah, staff is available to do individual one-on-one conversations. There are a lot of planners here today, so, you know, we can find you somebody if nobody else wants to come up. So, awesome. Thank you all. We appreciate your time. I know it's right before spring break.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov